A quiet change is unfolding in the very heart of the Catholic Church, so quiet that many missed it, but so profound that those who noticed it haven't stopped talking. It wasn't shouted from balconies, it wasn't announced in encyclicals. It came in the form of a subtle tone, a careful phrase, a single sentence whispered during what seemed like an ordinary public speech. But to millions of faithful Catholics around the world, especially those long devoted to the traditional Latin Mass, it meant everything. It was the final speech of Pope Leo XIV, and in it, they heard something that gave them hope. No grand declarations were made, no papal decrees issued. But to those who have endured years of liturgical restrictions, who have clung to sacred tradition like a lifeline, Pope Leo's final address felt like the opening of a long-closed door. It was the Jubilee celebration for the Eastern churches, a Amusentem gathering to honor the richness of Christian traditions in the East. But somehow, between the lines and gestures, between the quiet reverence and sacred affirmations, a message for the West was whispered. A message for those who have waited in silence. A message for those who still believe in mystery. When the Pope spoke of recovering mystery, it wasn't just a vague theological comment. It struck like thunder in the hearts of Catholics, who have felt abandoned. To recover a sense of mystery, he said, is not optional, it is essential. He didn't mention the Tridentine Mass by name. He didn't have to. The words carried their own weight. For those who have long loved the Latin Mass, its beauty, its silence, its reverence, it was as if Pope Leo was speaking directly to them, finally acknowledging the ache they've carried for years. Let's go back for a moment. In the summer of 2021, a document was released that changed everything for traditional Catholics. Traditionis Custodes, a title that ironically means guardians of tradition, was published under Pope Francis. But for many, it didn't feel like guardianship. It felt like restriction. The Latin Mass, once seen as a living and sacred expression of the Church, was now confined, marginalized, and treated almost like a danger. Gone were the days of liturgical openness under Pope Benedict XVI, who had worked tirelessly to reconcile the old and new forms of the Roman Rite. He didn't see them as opposing forces, but as different expressions of the same sacred mystery. But with the 2021 document, that hope seemed to dim. Faithful who had found spiritual peace in the Latin Mass suddenly found themselves praying in secrecy, seeking permissions and facing suspicion. And now, years later, just as many began to lose hope, Pope Leo XIV, on the world stage in his final speech, rekindled a small but powerful flame. He spoke not like a policymaker, but like a shepherd. He didn't issue mandates, he didn't condemn. He simply spoke with warmth, calm, and reverence. He quoted Pope Leo XIII with affection. He honored the ancient traditions of the Eastern churches, but in his tone, in his gaze, and in his deliberate silence, he seemed to say what many have waited so long to hear. That tradition matters, that beauty matters, that mystery is not something to be explained away, but something to be lived, breathed, and protected. The speech centered on the Eastern liturgies, but for many it was also a mirror for the West. It was a reminder of what the Latin Mass once was, and could be again. Pope Leo spoke of the liturgy as a symphony of presence, something that engages not just the spirit but the body, mind, and emotions. He said it must not be managed like a schedule, but cherished like a sacred inheritance. And that's the word that stuck with so many: inheritance. Because for generations the Latin Mass was not just a tradition. It was a gift handed down, shaped not by modern committees but by saints, mystics, martyrs, and generations of faithful Catholics. It was not nostalgia, it was spiritual continuity. And when Pope Leo described the liturgy as something alive, not outdated, something that sings of salvation, not entertains, it brought tears to the eyes of many who felt forgotten. This wasn't just about form, this was about faith. The Pope didn't demand a revolution, he offered a gesture. And in the world of Catholicism, where gestures often mean more than proclamations, this one landed like a sacred spark. And then came the moment that everyone's still talking about. A single sentence, carefully placed, almost as if it was meant only for those truly listening. When Pope Leo said, The sacred rites of the Church are not instruments of control. Something changed. He was referring to the broader Church, yes, but also perhaps to the very pain traditional Catholics have felt since 2021. Because that's what it's felt like. Control, regulation, marginalization, devoted Catholics asking bishops for permission to attend a form of worship that shaped the entire Church for centuries. Priests who longed to celebrate the Latin Mass doing so behind closed doors. Families teaching their children the ancient prayers in secret, as if their faith was something to hide. Why, they ask, is the Eastern Church's liturgy celebrated with honor, while the Latin tradition remains burdened with suspicion? Pope Leo didn't say the words, but he didn't need to. The contrast was clear. The silence was intentional. And perhaps that was the point, a silent invitation to rethink, reopen, and reconcile. He called the liturgy theology lived, not argued, not managed, but lived. In our modern age, where symbols are often explained until they lose meaning, and sacred gestures are shortened to fit within 30-minute schedules, Pope Leo's call felt like a wake-up call. Not an angry cry, but a gentle tolling bell. And, what a contrast that is, in many parishes today the Mass has become simplified, streamlined, polished for convenience, songs that entertain rather than elevate, prayers rushed, silence eliminated, reverence replaced by relevance. But for many, that streamlined experience leaves them spiritually starved. It's not what the Mass is meant to be. The Latin Mass, when celebrated with reverence and care, is not just beautiful, it's transforming, it softens hearts, it lifts souls, it creates space for repentance and adoration. It reminds us that we are in the presence of the divine. And as Pope Leo said, the liturgy must invite awe, not analysis. These are not words of criticism, they are words of vision. And it's this vision that gave millions of Catholics a new sense of hope. A sense that maybe, just maybe, the Church is listening, that those who love tradition are not alone, that their devotion is not outdated but essential, that the very beauty that shaped saints and martyrs is still alive and still needed. The Pope's words were a bridge between past and present, between old and new, between silence and speech. And perhaps that bridge will lead the Church to a new place, not backward, not forward, but deeper. One where the sacred is no longer sacrificed for the sake of speed. One where beauty is not dismissed as mere preference. One where mystery is welcomed, not explained away. In many ways, this wasn't a political moment. It was a spiritual one. One that cannot be legislated or regulated. One that speaks not to policy but to the soul. So what happens now? That's the question lingering in the hearts of the faithful. Pope Leo is gone. His final speech now echoes through churches, monasteries, and quiet homes, where the faithful kneel before flickering candles and pray in Latin, still waiting, still hoping. Will his successor continue this vision? Will the Church finally embrace both lungs, East and West, with equal reverence? Will the Latin Mass once again be seen not as a threat but as a treasure? No one knows. But what we do know is this. In his last address, Pope Leo XIV gave something that can't be taken back. He reminded the world that tradition is not dead, that the sacred is not outdated, that the Church is vast, ancient, and wide enough to hold both the old and the new. That liturgy is not about pleasing the people, but pleasing God. That worship is not performance, but surrender. And that the mystery of faith is not something we control, but something that controls us, changes us, transforms us. In a world obsessed with speed and relevance, Pope Leo lit a candle in the sanctuary, and even though the speech is over, that candle still burns. Let it be a beginning, let it be a call, let it be remembered. Because sometimes all it takes is a single phrase, a soft tone, a warm gesture, and the Church begins to breathe again.